Reflection can be a dangerous thing when the past is something you've been trying to outrun for years. Witness the chrome-sharp reality of justice as it finally catches up to those who thought they were safe. Subscribe today and watch the ultimate price of deception unfold.
The night my brother's engagement party was supposed to destroy me, I wore a dress that cost less than the centerpieces on their tables. That was intentional. My name is Rachel. I'm 31 years old, and for the past 6 years, my family has believed I am the cautionary tale they tell at dinner parties. The disappointing daughter. The one who threw away her finance degree to chase something unstable. The one who still rents, or so they think. While my younger brother Marcus drives a leased BMW and works at a firm my father spent 3 decades building connections to get him into. What my family does not know is that I own the building Marcus's firm operates out of. I own 4 others just like it across the city, and the property management company quietly sitting behind all of it, the one that collected rent from 47 commercial tenants last quarter, has my signature on every founding document. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 6 years ago, my father sat across from me at the kitchen table and told me I was making a mistake. I had just turned down a position at a wealth management firm, a position he had called in favors to arrange because I'd found something else. A small distressed property in a transitional neighborhood. A deal that made mathematical sense to me in a way that sitting in someone else's office never had. I tried to explain the numbers. He cut me off. "You don't know what you don't know," he said. "You're 25. You have no credit history, no collateral, no network. You're going to lose everything and come back here asking for help." My mother said nothing. She was good at that. Strategic silence, she probably called it. My brother, who was 22 at the time and had already been handed 2 internships through my father's connections, looked up from his phone long enough to smirk. I left the table. I did not ask for their help. I did not camp back asking for it either. What I did instead was spend the next 6 years building something quietly, methodically, and almost entirely alone. I house-hacked that first property, rented out every unit I wasn't sleeping in, reinvested every dollar, and used the equity to move into commercial. I found a mentor who had done it before me. I read everything. I made mistakes that cost me money I couldn't afford to lose and learned from every single one. By year 3, I had a small portfolio and a management company that was starting to generate real income. By year 5, I had crossed a threshold that still sometimes surprises me when I look at the numbers. I never told my family any of it. Partly because I knew they wouldn't believe me, partly because I wanted to understand something first. Whether their dismissal of me was circumstantial, tied to my apparent failure, or whether it was just who they were. I needed to see them clearly before I decided what to do with that clarity, so I played the part they had already assigned me. When my mother called, I mentioned freelance work. When my father asked, I said things were fine, getting by. When Marcus texted to brag about his bonus, I sent back a thumbs up. I showed up to family dinners in modest clothes, drove a 4-year-old car, and let them fill in the blanks the way they always had. The picture they painted was of a woman who had gambled and lost, quietly struggling, too proud to admit her father had been right. They were comfortable with that picture. Maybe they needed it. The engagement party invitation arrived on a Tuesday. My brother was marrying a woman named Christine, whose family owned a mid-sized regional bank and who wore the particular expression of someone who had never been told no about anything consequential. The party was being held at a venue my mother had been trying to get a reservation at for years. Black tie. 70 guests. The kind of event designed to announce a family's standing as much as celebrate a relationship. The invitation included a handwritten note from my mother at the bottom. "I want you to dress appropriately this time, Rachel. This matters to us. Please don't make it awkward." I read that line twice. I RSVP'd yes. The week before the party, I got a call from my property manager, David. One of our commercial tenants had flagged something in their lease renewal documents, a clause that had been misdrafted by the previous attorney, which meant a renegotiation was going to be necessary. Routine. The kind of thing I handled regularly now without stress. What was not routine was the name of the tenant's parent company when I pulled the file. Hargrove & Associates. My father's firm. The one he had spent 30 years building. The one that occupied the entire 3rd floor of a building I had purchased 14 months ago. I sat with that information for a long time. Then I called my attorney and told her to prepare the revised lease documents and hold them. I would let her know when to send them. The party was on a Saturday. I arrived 7 minutes late, which was exactly intentional. The room was full of people I half recognized from my father's professional orbit, partners, clients, the particular social architecture of old money making new money feel welcome. My mother spotted me from across the room, and the brief flicker across her face told me she was assessing my outfit before she finished registering my face. I had worn a black dress. Simple, well-cut, nothing that invited comment. I had also worn the patience of someone who had been waiting a very long time for a specific conversation. Christine's mother found me first. She was warm in the way that people who have never had to work at warmth are warm. Effortlessly, a little carelessly. We exchanged pleasantries. She asked what I did. I said I was in commercial real estate. She nodded with polite interest and moved on. My father found me near the bar. He looked well. He always looked well. That particular brand of groomed, settled confidence that comes from decades of being the most important person in most rooms he enters. He put a hand on my shoulder in a way that was both affectionate and faintly proprietary. "You came," he said. "Of course. Your brother is happy." He said it with a weight that implied Marcus's happiness was something I had historically threatened. "He looks it." There was a pause. My father scanned the room the way he always did at events, cataloging, assessing. Then, without looking at me, "You still doing the property thing?" "The property thing?" "Yes," I said, "still doing that." He made a sound that wasn't quite dismissive and wasn't quite encouraging, a sound he had perfected over years of conversations with me. Then someone called his name from across the room, and he squeezed my shoulder once and walked away. My mother came to find me during dinner. She sat down in the empty chair beside me with the specific energy of a woman who had prepared what she was about to say. She smelled like the same perfume she had worn my entire childhood. "I'm glad you came," she said. "I want tonight to be good for all of us. It's a beautiful party," I said. "Christine's family is very generous." She paused. "Her father has already offered Marcus a path toward a partnership track. Real stability, the kind that builds over time." Another pause, more deliberate. "I know that path wasn't for you. I know you've had to find your own way. I just hope you're doing okay, Rachel." "Actually okay." I looked at her. There it was, the particular grammar of my mother's concern, which was always structured as sympathy but carried the architecture of condescension inside it. "I know you've had to find your own way." As if the path I chose was the consolation prize I'd settled for after failing to get the real one. "I'm doing very well," I said. She patted my hand. "Good. That's all I want." The speeches happened. My brother spoke about Christine with the articulate ease of a man who has always believed he deserves what he has. Christine's father spoke about legacy. My father made a toast that was warmly received and made 3 people cry. I watched all of it from my seat and thought about the lease documents sitting in my attorney's inbox. The moment came the way these moments always do, not dramatically, but through a small accumulation of ordinary cruelties. It was after dinner, near the end of the evening, when the room had loosened and the conversations had gotten louder. I was standing with a small group that included Christine's aunt, a partner from my father's firm named Gerald, and my brother. Someone had asked Gerald about the office, a casual question about the new floor plan renovation they'd been planning. Gerald laughed. "Well, we'll see if our landlord agrees to the structural modification clause. Lease renewal is coming up, and apparently there's some question about the terms." He shook his head with the mild irritation of a man unaccustomed to not getting what he wants immediately. My brother looked at him. "Who's your landlord?" "Some holding company. Haven't dealt with him directly. It goes through a property management outfit." Gerald took a drink. "Honestly, these investment groups buy up commercial real estate and half of them don't know what they're doing. We'll sort it out." My brother nodded with the confidence of someone who had never had to sort anything out himself. Then he turned to me. I think because I was the closest person, I think without really thinking about it, and said, "That's what happens when you let amateurs play landlord." He said it lightly. "The way you say things you've said so many times they've stopped feeling sharp to you." The group laughed. Gerald laughed. Christine's aunt smiled. I smiled too. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice exactly the same temperature it had been all evening, "I'm familiar with that situation." Gerald looked at me with polite curiosity. "Oh, the holding company is mine," I said. "And the property management outfit. I own the building your firm is in, Gerald. I've owned it for 14 months. The silence that followed was not long. It only felt that way. Gerald stared at me with the specific expression of a man rapidly recalculating. "I'm sorry. Which entity?" I told him the name of the holding company. I watched his face confirm it. "Rachel," he said slowly, "your firm handled the Meridian Corridor acquisition last year. That was a substantial transaction." "It was one of 4 that year," I said. "The portfolio's grown since." My brother had gone very still beside me. I could feel it without looking at him. Gerald recovered first, the way people who are professionally skilled at recovering do. He extended his hand with a laugh that was genuine if slightly stunned. Well, I have to say, I did not expect this conversation tonight. Neither did I said. Which was half true. My brother found his voice. You own Dad's building. I own the building your father's firm leases space in, yes. Since when? 14 months ago. It came up in a portfolio acquisition. I didn't realize the connection until the lease renewal came up this week. He looked at me with an expression I had not seen on my brother's face before. It was not anger. It was not exactly shock. It was something more like the specific vertigo of a person who has just discovered that the map they've been using to navigate a relationship is fundamentally wrong. Why didn't you, he started, tell you, I asked. Tell you what, Marcus? That I was building something? I tried to, once. The last time I tried, Dad told me I didn't know what I didn't know and walked away from the table. Gerald excused himself quietly. Christine's aunt had evaporated. It was just my brother and me now, in the corner of a room full of people celebrating his life. That's not fair, he said. Maybe not, I said, but it's accurate. My father found us about 4 minutes later. I'm not sure who flagged him, Gerald, probably, or the look on my brother's face. He walked over with the measured pace of a man who senses a situation requiring management. What's going on? My brother looked at him. Did you know Rachel owns your building? My father's expression did something complicated. He looked at me. What building? Hargrove and Associates, 3rd floor. 14 months, I said. The lease renewal is currently sitting with my attorney. There's a clause question that needs to be resolved before we move forward. My father was quiet for a moment. He was good at that too, composing himself under pressure, finding the posture of control even when the ground had shifted. It was one of the things I had always admired about him, and one of the things I had spent years building in myself. How large is your portfolio? He said. Not a question, exactly. More like a man reading a document he had not expected to be handed. I told him the number of properties. I told him the rough valuation. I watched his face. He looked at me for a long time. Why didn't you tell us? And there it was, the question with the real question underneath it, which was not why hadn't I shared information, but why had I felt the need to disappear in the first place? Why had I built an entire professional life in the deliberate blind spot of the people who were supposed to be rooting for me? I could have been gracious. I could have offered the answer that made everyone comfortable, said I valued my privacy, said I hadn't wanted to mix family and business, said any of the kind, accommodating things that would have let him reframe the evening into something he could manage. Instead, I told him the truth. Because the last time I tried to tell you something about what I was building, you told me I didn't know what I didn't know, I said. And you were right, by the way, I didn't, but I went and learned it anyway. Without your help, without your connections, without anyone calling in favors for me. I kept my voice even. I didn't tell you because I needed to know whether you believed in me or believed in the version of me you'd already decided on. Now I know. My father did not respond right away. My mother had appeared at some point, I wasn't sure when, and was standing slightly behind him, her hand on his arm, her face doing something I could not read. Marcus was looking at the floor. Rachel? My mother said. Her voice was softer than I expected. I know what you always, I said, gently. I'm not angry. I want you to know that. I'm not doing this to be cruel, and I'm not doing this for leverage. I looked at my father. The lease renewal will be handled professionally, the same as any other tenant. You'll get fair terms. That won't change. I set down my glass, but I needed tonight to be what it was. I needed you to see me. I said goodbye to Christine, who shook my hand with a slightly dazed expression and said it was wonderful to meet me properly. I said the same. I drove home alone in my 4-year-old car, through streets that were quiet and dark and entirely ordinary. I didn't feel triumphant exactly. I didn't feel the clean satisfaction of a settled score. What I felt, mostly, was finished. Like a chapter that had been running too long had finally turned its last page. My father called 2 days later. The conversation was short and careful and full of the particular restraint of two people who were figuring out a new language. He said he was proud of me. It came out slightly stiff, like a sentence he had practiced, and I understood that for him, saying it was an act of effort, not performance. Thank you, I said. The building, he said. Did you know when you bought it? No, I said. I found out when the lease renewal came up. He was quiet for a moment. And you came to the party anyway. I came to the party anyway. Another pause. That was brave, he said. Or stubborn. Probably both, I said. He laughed. A real laugh, short and surprised. It was the best sound I'd heard from him in 6 years. We are not fixed, my family and I. I want to be honest about that. The dinner table is not suddenly easy. My mother still says things that carry weight she doesn't examine. My brother is still working through what he thought he knew about me. These things take time and there are no guarantees, but I stopped waiting for their permission to take up space a long time ago. I built something real while they were looking the other way, and when the moment finally came to let them see it, I did not apologize for it, I did not shrink it to fit their comfort, and I did not pretend the years of silence had cost me nothing. They see me now. That matters, even if it came late. And the lease, for the record, was renewed on fair and standard terms. Some things don't need to be a weapon just because they could be. There's something nobody tells you about building a life in silence. That the silence itself becomes a kind of test, not for the people around you, for you. For 6 years, I watched my family look through me the way people look through a window they've stopped noticing. I was there, present at every dinner, every holiday, every conversation where my brother's latest achievement was passed around the table like something warm. And I sat with my hands in my lap and said nothing about what I was building, because I had learned early that the people who love you can also be the people most committed to a fixed idea of who you are. What Rachel did, and what I think about when I think about her story, wasn't revenge. It wasn't a performance designed to humiliate the people who had dismissed her. It was something quieter and more demanding than that. It was the decision to keep going anyway. To take the closed door as information rather than verdict. To build the thing she believed in without requiring anyone's permission or validation to begin. That kind of persistence doesn't come from stubbornness alone. It comes from a specific kind of self-trust, the willingness to act on your own judgment when the evidence around you says you're wrong. That is not a small thing. Most people, when enough voices tell them they are mistaken, eventually adjust their internal compass to match the external noise. Rachel didn't. And the result was a portfolio, a company, and a life that no one could take credit for except herself. The cause and the effect here are direct. She was dismissed, so she worked without distraction. She was underestimated, so she operated without the kind of careless confidence that makes people sloppy. She had no safety net, so she learned the fundamentals so thoroughly that the ground itself became something she understood. Every hard thing that was done to her became, in her hands, a condition that made her sharper. That's not luck. That's not fate. That is what happens when a person chooses integrity over bitterness, discipline over resentment, and consistent action over the comfort of being right in theory. The moral weight in this story sits in a single moment. Not the reveal, not the lease documents, not the stunned silence in that room. It sits in the years before any of that, in the ordinary mornings when Rachel could have stopped and didn't. When she made the harder choice instead of the easier one, not because anyone was watching, but because she had decided what kind of person she was going to be. We become what we repeatedly choose, not what we intend, not what we announce, what we choose, quietly, when no one is keeping score. That's the whole lesson, and it doesn't require a $2.4 billion empire to apply it. It just requires the willingness to keep going, one more day, one more decision, one more act of showing up for the life you're trying to build, even when the people at the dinner table have already written the ending for you. They don't get to write your ending, you do.